Welcome to Expiscore, the web blog of Stephen Hall, Director General of WorldFish. In these blogs, Steve gives his personal reflections on current topics and areas of debate in the realm of fish and development. In this podcast, Steve discusses different approaches to achieving development outcomes by reimagining agricultural research in development.
Researchers, development practitioners and policymakers recognise that efforts during the 1970s and 80s to develop new high-yielding hybrid seeds and transfer them to farmers played an important part in removing the spectre of widespread starvation, especially in Asia. This, combined with the introduction of fertiliser and efforts to develop markets, also ushered in a period of cheap and relatively stable prices for the world's staple crops, and it brought millions of farmers out of poverty. Aptly named the Green Revolution, this undoubted success deserves celebration. But evidence tells us that developing technologies in research stations and working to get farmers to take them up, the backbone in effect of the Green Revolution, has got significant weaknesses. Attractive and logical as it seems, this innovation pipeline or technology transfer approach has often failed, either because the technologies developed on research stations proved unsuitable for real-world farmers' fields, or because farmers failed to adopt them for other reasons. Arguably because of this, and certainly despite 40 years of effort, about 1 billion people remain in poverty, 870 million of whom live in rural areas that the Green Revolution hoped to reach. Concern about the effectiveness of the innovation pipeline approach isn't new. As early as the 1970s, some researchers were starting to survey farmers to learn more about their farming practices and the constraints they faced, so that solutions from the field station could be better tailored. Building on this, in the following decades, pioneering researchers went further and collaborated with farmers in joint research projects conducted on their farms. And in the 2000s, we saw approaches continue to evolve, with partnerships widening beyond researcher and farmer to include actors such as NGOs and policymakers in multi-stakeholder networks. Networks that sought to co-develop solutions, not just concerning the production technologies and practices on farm, but also the wider institution and value chain issues that affect farmers' livelihoods. In an excellent essay, Robert Chambers argues that, in essence, these developments represented a shift in mindset from an emphasis on things, the supply of technologies, to one that recognises people and complexity. People, because to achieve meaningful change we need to pay attention to what people believe, how they behave, and the relationships between them. Complexity, because rural environments and societies are often highly diverse and behave in unpredictable ways. Today, there's a growing conviction, which I share, that persistent pockets of rural poverty will probably only be tackled by adopting this people and complexity mindset. What's needed are highly networked, collaborative engagements that bring multiple actors and institutions together to co-develop solutions tailored for the particular circumstances of a given place. I'm interested in these approaches because they seem especially important for the communities living along freshwater floodplains, coastal deltas and inshore marine waters. We call these areas aquatic agricultural systems, and they're an obvious focus for WorldFish because improving fisheries and aquaculture in these regions often has high potential for making a difference. But fish are not the only game in town in these places. Instead, depending on season or circumstance, families also cultivate a range of crops, raise livestock, gather fruits and other tree crops, and harness natural resources such as timber, reeds and wildlife. What characterises these aquatic agricultural systems, then, is the diversity of the production systems and the diversity of livelihood strategies that can be found, even within single households. And it's this complexity and the diversity of ways in which people have to work to get by that cautions us against simplistic linear approaches where we develop and provide technical solutions to fisheries and aquaculture problems and encourage uptake. Instead, we need to draw on the growing body of research and experience that seeks these alternative ways for bringing the full panoply of stakeholders and expertise together to understand and work with communities to make a difference. Unfortunately, although the arguments for adopting approaches consistent with this people and complexity mindset are compelling, one must also acknowledge that moving away from the technology transfer model often proves difficult. And there seem to be several reasons for this. First, the idea of technology transfer remains very seductive and continues to dominate. Many funding agencies and policymakers, for example, continue to hove to the things mindset, and they're reluctant to support alternatives. I'm sure this is in part a result of our inherent faith in technology. We all like to believe that magic bullets exist, but it's also probably because the potential payoffs, if the approach is successful, are easy to model and measure as macroeconomic impacts on national accounts. I also suspect it's because the policy model to support the research approach, the funding of research and extension services, is pretty straightforward to understand and easy to administer. The second reason, I think, is that implementing collaborative, multi-stakeholder approaches is complicated, unpredictable, and resource-intensive. The outcomes are also context-specific and can rarely be predetermined at inception. If you think about it, it could hardly be otherwise when bringing people with diverse beliefs, capabilities, interests and power relations together to arrive at creative solutions for problems they identify at scales ranging from individual farms through to institutions and up to national policy. For these reasons, a question remains about the potential for such approaches to have rapid and cost-effective impact over large areas. And this concern that complex participatory processes will forever remain a provider of boutique, local solutions is a genuine one. And it's legitimised by the fact that although there are lots of good examples of local success, we don't yet have a clear synthesis of what works where and why, and how success might best be scaled out. And it's for this reason that WorldFish, as part of the CGIAR, decided to bring together a group of experts from diverse backgrounds and institutions to discuss this topic. Entitled Reimagining Agricultural Research in Development, the primary purpose of this event is to help us in our work to improve the lives of people living in aquatic agricultural systems. But I'm sure that it's also going to be of considerable use to others. So, if you're a donor interested in learning about these approaches for achieving development outcomes, a policymaker concerned for areas that the Green Revolution left behind, a researcher who believes that people and complexity matter, or simply an interested citizen, I encourage you to reflect on the importance of embracing a people and complexity perspective. Better still, why not also explore the website describing our global dialogue on reimagining agricultural research in development and its outcomes? Of course, despite this pressing need for these approaches, we should also bear in mind the 15th century expression, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." In other words, there remains a need for improved varieties, improved extension services and inputs, and market development. And for our part, WorldFish will continue to invest in developing and disseminating faster growing and more resilient strains of the tilapias, carps and other species that are suited for use by fish farmers in developing countries. I remain convinced, though, that unless we balance this things perspective with the more challenging people and complexity perspectives, we'll be doing the world a disservice.
Thank you for listening to Expiscore, the web blog of Stephen Hall. If you have any comments or feedback on this podcast, go to blog.worldfishcentre.org or email expiscore@worldfishcentre.org. Also, be sure to find us on iTunes and subscribe to this podcast.